Tonight on Ground Crew Command Radio, we got a very interesting planetary clearing report for you, plus another update on it of things that have happened only in the last 24 hours. I will get into the elephant in the room with regards to yesterday's post by Cobra that seemingly at least 95% of people have missed. You're going to find that one very, very interesting, folks. And of course, all the remaining usual, riveting, revealing, planetary liberation news analysis towards the last half hour or so of the show. And special guest on tonight is Dane R., one of the council members of prepareforchangeleadership.org. We're going to get into some details on what is called SCIET dynamics, which is time, space and holographic mechanics and how to master it. Very interesting stuff there today, folks. Well done for joining in today's show, because it's going to be a really empowering and uplifting one. This is Ground Crew Command Radio. You're listening to The Unknown Light Warrior. This is Ground Crew Command Radio. You're listening to The Unknown Light Warrior. And folks, some of you have written in and told me about the very nasty overall attack that occurred, let me see, Sunday night, US time, late afternoon, Sunday night, US time, so it'll be Monday morning or midday for pretty much the rest of the world. And again, the symptoms vary. And yes, I understand it's disheartening, because you're wondering, okay, how much more needs to be cleared before we can finally end these horrible attacks. We got good news on that, because, well, first of all, it's important to keep in perspective that it's going to get louder right up until the very last of it, the very ending of it. That's why, without doing the usual daily or weekly practice of clearing and healing, let alone joining in any mass meditation group, not just the 144K, let's face it, you'd be crazy not to do any of those things, when you know what's going on. Now, I'm going to quickly get into the attacks on, for most of us, I mean, some had a horrible day Saturday as well, but really it was Sunday. Certainly the majority of us really felt it. And it wouldn't stop, so I did do this, that and the other kind of on-the-fly clearing externally, but really it wasn't until Monday morning that I was able to sit down and start testing what's really going on. Because you know how it is when you transmit this, transmit the other, then you wonder, is it something internal? Is it just me? And none of it sort of stops it. None of it sort of checks out or provides any answers. So Monday morning I had to sit down and, next to my cup of coffee and start testing what's going on here. And, okay, well, as it turns out, after doing the whole long process, because sometimes, you know, that intuitive or psychic hit isn't quite there. It doesn't come through loud and clear, and you have to sit down and do the testing and ask one question after the other. Is it internal? No. Is it external? No. Is it plasma archons? No. You know, that kind of thing. I suppose it helps to know, have the reference points to know what questions to ask. And anyway, a very long story short, it was about 10 questions, one of which consisted, is it external? Yes. And then I asked at some point, is it from the non-physical planes? No. Is it from the physical plane? Yes. And then you ask a better question by narrowing it down like that. And so to cut a long sequence of questions short, or to cut a long story short, it was a technology from the physical plane that was based in one of the Draco Chimera underground bases. And that just came up to the surface as an issue, because I'm sure it was always there in the background doing its part to try to stop us and unravel the planetary liberation process by causing, for some of us, those incessant, seemingly unavoidable tit-for-tat arguments or bickering amongst light workers. Of course, it may have affected you through a different symptom, especially if you're, you know, by yourself. And let's just say in terms of what I got, okay, this is just my investigative research. You may have gotten other things, but anyway, what I got was this physical base. It was part of a network of underground bases, Draco Chimera, and a lot of personnel there. Basically, it's one of their last remaining and seemingly their main underground stronghold that, as you know, per Cobra's post several months ago, are being cleared out. Now, and it was a network of bases sort of close together, and it was, from what I got, on the south, just off the south coast of the Horn of Africa, which is where Somalia is. Which makes sense, because there's a lot of negative energies that are anchored in Somalia. There's open slave auctions, for example, literally, in Somalia. And for those of you who follow InfoWars, you'll know this. And so that helped attract or accrete that kind of presence of a lot of physical level Draco, reptilian, and Chimera presence within this particular network of bases. And one of this that's where the technology, it was simply like a little pillar with a black sphere on top of it, and that was beaming to all light workers primarily. Really nasty energies that affects the physical brain in a certain way, partly through magnetics, that holds, because you know how you got love frequency and this, that, and the other frequency. Each emotion or energy has a specific frequency to it. So this was beaming really heavy anger frequency, irritation type frequencies, depression type frequencies, which can lead to pain, which then leads to anger. Anyway, the kind of frequencies, really powerful technologies. And it was a black sphere within a certain, like a chamber, like a room. Now, the big problem that existed for the physical light forces, both off-world and surface, is these sorts of strategic bases, power centers, that are very important to darkness. They're heavily fortified with plasma and etheric technologies. Really heavy fortification. I mean, they got physical fortification as well, but that's easily handled by the off-world galactic groups, such as the Confederation, Galactic Confederation, yours and my galactic family, and so forth. That's not a problem. The tricky part was the etheric and plasma fortifications, and magnetic as well. But what made it even harder was that they were heavily infested with plasma topper bombs. Okay, each layer of these fortifications, so that if anyone makes a move, the slightest move to try to remove or disarm these fortifications, one of the or all of the plasma topper bombs will detonate. Big problem. And this was the same situation that I found when I did another bit of remote work with the teams. You know, when was it? Late November, on the 12 or so Cabal, Draco, Chimera, Antarctica bases. Okay, about 12 of them. The same fortifications, each booby-trapped or peppered with plasma topper bombs. And, you know, we did that, and if you go back far enough in Ground Crew Command episodes to that point in time, you can listen to it about it there, or the blog as well, with the article post promoting the same episode. And you know, that was removed, the etheric plasma fortifications removed, the plasma topper bombs were removed by the teams. And the key enabling ingredient to all of this is that someone is needed on the surface, on the physical plane of the surface, that's still within a physical body that's incarnated through the natural energetic process. That was a key ingredient in enabling that to happen. Very much a team effort. It's like soul fragment retrieval. You can only do it while you're still within the physical, in your physical body, with the intent to do that. Like I said many times before, when you're projecting your consciousness from within your physical body on the physical plane to the non-physical, you literally have Superman-like powers. And that's been one of the main missing, for the most part anyway, missing key ingredients in the planetary liberation process. And when that's added to the mix, then the beyond multiversal beings that I work with, and four faith system users and ICB users work with, as well as the galactic forces, both physical and non-physical, that's when they can really rock and roll. And that's why so much is cleared and done during mass meditations. Anyway, I digress. Although they are important fundamentals to really grasp and apply in your life. So basically the same situation with those Antarctica bases back in late November. You know, I did the same thing. Cleared the plasma topper bombs, non-physical fortifications. And then, although I'm not making any claims here, but at the very least it helped, about 2 weeks later, Cobra reported, so this is early November last year, Cobra reports, you know, lo and behold, that a big operation of the light forces, both surface and off-world, was launched early November that cleared out about 80% of bases, personnel, infrastructure of the Chimera, Draco and Cabal in those Antarctica bases. About 80% of them cleared in one fell swoop, as far as the physical action is concerned. And that was, I don't know, it may have occurred just after this energy work, but at the very least, it probably assisted in removing those plasma topper bombs infested non-physical fortifications of those 12 or so bases in Antarctica. And the operation on the physical plane occurred, which cleared out 80% of everything. Sometime in late November, early December. And then, of course, within early December, Cobra gave that report. So that bit of remote work either had a bit to do with it and helped, or had a lot to do with it and was instrumental in bringing down the non-physical fortifications to take those physical action steps. Basically, the same thing happened with this, network, but very large presence of dark underground bases on the physical plane, just south of the coast of Somalia. And then when that was done, then the usual process of clearing all negative entities and portals that hide negative entities was done because of the fortifications. It provides a safe place for non-physical negative entities to hide within and then launch their operations from. That was cleared, and then that particular piece of technology was able to be shut down, at least in terms of my experience, what I saw and did with the teams. So that's the report. And, and I wasn't done with that session till about Monday lunchtime. This is mountain time. So hopefully that helped all of us in humanity have a much easier Monday night or Tuesday for the rest of the world. And yeah, it was exhausting, but light work is light work. The word work is the key word in there. That's what we're here for. And this new kind of attack, well, it's not necessarily new, but this particular piece of technology in that particular location on the physical plane, the fact that we're dealing with physical level stuff now, which is what that Monday's session was an indicator of, that's a good sign, because it means that we're not dealing as much, at least, with non-physical infrastructure and technologies, which, let's face it, just in late 2014, for example, we were getting hammered through the etheric and plasma scalar tech infrastructure. And with that done, it is important to appreciate that a Thursday night's 144K mass meditation for the solar, the solar or lunar eclipse? I can't remember now. It's been so much going on. Thursday night / Monday morning, that mass meditation we did, and a big salute to those of you who were able to consciously participate with any amount of time that you had. That, once again, really shook things up in a positive way, really cleared a lot, shifted things to the highest timeline. And the irony is that, the coming days after that, it exposed much quicker and much deeper anything else that was dense, whether it's on the physical or non-physical, that forced it up for clearing. It sort of quickens that process. So it easily creates, to the untrained eye, it easily creates the false impression that things seem to be getting worse, when that's not the case. It allows for the deeper level or the next stuff, external stuff that needs to be cleared, to come up even quicker and faster to be cleared. And until it's cleared, you get whacked. This is why the old adage, war is hell, that's why war is hell. And this is nothing to feel fear about or disheartened or depressed about. That's not the message. The message is we're making far more progress, far quicker than what we otherwise would have. And if we were just sitting on our hands, waiting for the light forces, the surface and off-world light forces to do it all for us. And rest assured, they're really rooting for us. They're really excited and really happy to see us do our part that they need. Otherwise, rest assured, this will take much, much longer if we don't do our part, fulfill our sole purpose. When I was at the Taipei Cobra conference a few months ago in May, Cobra said if all light workers or enough light workers were actually actively doing their sole mission back in 1990 right through till 1995, the event would have happened at about 1995. And even despite that, enough was done that forced the dark forces, both the Chimera and the Archons, and even higher levels of darkness beyond them, to have to act and trigger the third Archon invasion in January or February, I think it was, in 1996, to stop it all. That's when they all called all their forces from the Regal star system, the Orion star system, the home planets of the Chimera, for example, both physically and non-physically. They had to withdraw all their forces to Earth, because that's their number one jewel prize, to defend Earth, or their occupation of Earth. That's what happened in 1996, which delayed everything. But anyway, that's a whole other story. And let me see here. There was a contact in Turkey, has just informed us a few hours ago. Oh, by the way, just to finish off, apparently, I believe it was yesterday. I'm not sure it was yesterday or Monday afternoon, US time. One of the ramifications of all this remote energy work and shutting down the bases and the mass meditation last Thursday night, what that's done is it's really forced up even non-physical reptilians to launch an attack as well. But like I said, have no fear. It means we're going through this, much quicker. It's to use the old analogy, it's the difference between going through a 5-day detox, physical detox, as opposed to going through a 30-day detox. The 30-day one's going to be easier and softer, but longer. And as far as sex trafficking victims are concerned, very, very hard for them to wait that long. So they're counting on us. Make no mistake. The galactic forces are counting on us. The surface white hats are counting on us to throw our energetic weight behind the overall planetary liberation efforts. And that's just the way it is. It'll all be over soon. So stay the course. I won't come up with any other quotes, although it's very pertinent when it comes to staying the course. So anyway, the latest from Turkey, from a contact in Turkey is, and this is their words, quote, "War has broken out in Turkey." We don't have any further details on that, at least as of half an hour ago. My partner is watching for any messages regarding that. A very big deal indeed. And I'm going to bring on Dana to now get in to, well, really ultimately satisfying the rational mind, because the rational mind needs to know the details. It needs to know the details of the details of how to mould your hologram, otherwise known as outer reality / holographic universe. Okay. To satisfy the rational mind. And then after that, I'm just going to give you the very abbreviated, to the point, way of how to control and mould your outer reality / hologram by making those quantum waveform particles localize into whatever space-time event you want, aka manifestation. Call it what you want. Okay, so we're going to spend 30, 40 minutes with Dana of prepareforchangeleadership.org to get into the nuts and bolts of that, to make Mr. and Mrs. Rational Mind, left hemisphere mind, all happy. Because often it needs to buy into things to change one's beliefs, to therefore let your desires manifest, you know. So we're going to get into that in a minute, and after that, I'm going to explain, read between the lines. That's the big reason why you tune into Ground Crew Command, which makes a big difference, as many people have told me. Read between the lines with Cobra's latest post. It is the elephant in the room. It's a very exciting elephant in the room in the most positive way of what he's really communicating in an underlying, implied kind of way by posting what he posted yesterday. Very big deal. And I'm going to get into that for a few minutes before I get into planetary liberation news analysis. Okay, so let's look for Dana's phone number here. Bear with me. And we're back. This is Ground Crew Command Radio. You're listening to the Unknown Light Warrior, your loyal, faithful servant of light, yours in service. And now, Dane, I've got you live. So just go ahead and bigger. Yep, just say hello to everyone. And
hello, everybody.
Really fantastic. Okay. You're loud and clear. Your sound is pretty good, even though you had to call in by phone. Not my preferred method, but you seem to be coming through loud and clear, which is the main thing. So, I know you've been working all day, but how have you been?
I'm feeling really great about everything. Really eager to share with people what's going on, what I've developed over the years, and like to get right into it.
Yeah, because as you've explained to me in private conversations, this is something that you've spent quite a few, years in delving into, exploring, understanding, and above all, and this is always the hardest part, extrapolating it and synthesizing it in a way that the left hemisphere brain and rational mind can understand, and then verbalizing it, which isn't easy either. And because, I remember one PhD professor in neurology says there's no way we can even, at least at a conscious mind sense of the word, verbalize or comprehend the complexity of how the brain actually works. Like the complexity just keeps on compounding on itself and compounding on itself, seemingly exponentially. And folks, Dana, that's the kind of thing he's been wrestling with over the years, and has managed to, I suppose, like I said, synthesize the important parts into verbals that make sense, that the rational mind can grasp. Because it's really, really hard to verbalize a lot of non-physical stuff. And, I'm talking from personal experience. And so we're going to get into, and I'll probably pronounced this wrong, SCIET dynamics, which is basically the nuts and bolts of various aspects of the mechanics of the quantum particles, quantum field, the holographic universe. And we'll do our best, folks, because it's not easy with this sort of thing when it comes to downloading, synthesizing it in a way that the rational mind can understand, and then verbalizing it. We'll do our best to, bring it back home, so to speak, in a way that you can apply, that you can walk away with. Have those empowering aha moments and apply to your life. And we're going to break that down in short, simple ways as well, so that, as with every Ground Crew Command Radio episode, you walk away with a lot. You come out the other side of every episode smarter, stronger, more confident, more empowered, and, with that next big step back to your true identity completed after each episode of Ground Crew Command. That's what we're here for. It's your support network, and that's enough setting the stage. So, Dane, again, in a way that's, that's most easy for people to understand and use in their day-to-day, where's the best place to start off from?
Well,
in terms of
beginning, at the
that
beginning,
makes sense.
Jim, when I began this search, personal search, it was just that, a personal search. I was searching for scientific proof of the soul, and I started off with the nub of an idea that there was a structure of energy, and to compare it to other scientists, Einstein was looking for to ride the wave, and I wanted to make it stand still. I wanted to see how light could stand still, and that was the beginning. And then I went back to school to study parapsychology. I went from there in only 9 months to having a 20-minute download of information that explained everything. I had to quit college to keep from having misinformation take over the download. And then for the next 15 or 20 years, I was completely preoccupied when I wasn't working. Basically, whenever I stopped thinking about anything else, it would just flow into my mind. But ultimately, what I came up with was an understanding that the mind is the perfect vehicle to understand the soul and how it works, because the mind is the product of all your sensory input. You have the ability to remember things that happened in the past. You have the ability to imagine things in the future that don't exist. You have the ability to process all the information coming into your sensory systems to, like avoid being run over by a car or killed by an animal. This basic capability of the human mind is based on a sense of forward movement, of an awareness of what's around us, front, back, side, and this is the nature of the soul. The mechanics are not necessary to get into, but I can. Anybody wants to know and is willing to sit through what is probably a long and boring dissertation, perfectly welcome to. But
we'll see how we go.
Ultimately, what we have is a space-time memory scheme, which consists of like a tunnel of light. I've got an illustration on my website about that. But essentially, you exist in the middle of a field of information. And if you close your eyes and imagine where you are are sort of in this middle of your head. You can hear from your left and right and see what's in front of you and are aware of what's behind you, but you have a sense of being in the middle of your head. And this phenomenon can be generalized with using the mathematical concepts that I've developed, that you are essentially a point of awareness inside of a field of information. And that field of information is generated by your nervous system on a continuous input, And, as if you were driving down the road or going forward down a road, you have a sense of what's in the front of you, but you also have a sense of what is behind you. And the soul consists of what's behind you going back through all of your lifetimes. And if you go all the way to the end of that backward, you end up with being a sense of intention from the Creator. And the creation, the sense of creation or sense of being is just that, it is to be. The best way to explain it is the concept of the I am. There is a very clear intention involved with being, with the soul. And as we live our lives and we continually bring information in, we can remember it. The mathematics that I have created describes essentially a spherical vortex, and the reality of our experience is that we're in an environment in our heads that we have created, that our brain creates, and that reality is observed by us against by the nervous system, which uses the algorithm, one of the algorithms that I have developed or that I have recognized to bring information into a system where it creates basically a spherical image of everything around you, and it's an environment, a holographic environment inside your head. And so this is where the soul actually resides. It resides in the middle of a field of information. And if you wanted to think about it as a road going back into the past, you would exist in the middle of that road as an observer of all sides. And you would have the ability to go to any point on that road and observe all sides of it from any direction. The soul is not as mysterious as people think. It's actually just a recording of everything that's happened in the evolution of your being through multiple lifetimes, and it is really recognizable from your everyday experience. People think it.
Okay, so sorry to cut in. Now, with regards to the algorithm that you mentioned regarding the nervous system that receives this information from the outside field of information, that algorithm, that wouldn't by any chance happen to be consisting of one's beliefs and subconscious programs, for that matter, by any chance, would it?
Well, that filters it. You're talking about filters. The algorithm describes that whenever you move, when anything moves in space, it adjusts its energy field to everything around it. So if you move 2 feet forward, you adjust to everything around you 2 feet worth. Okay, you're 2 feet closer to something, 2 feet further away from something. There's a frequency adjustment that occurs, and the SCIET is actually the mechanics of that adjustment, and it's not that hard to understand. It basically is taking a point to in front of you. And in the case of the human being's nervous system, it's a convergence of the left and right neural fields where we focus, and that simply subdivides continuously until it gets down to the size of about at the back of the fovea of the eye is a good way to think of it. And that size then represents a input from a space that's probably 3 miles. So, and this happens almost instantaneously. Instantaneously, you are adjusting to up to 3 miles or more than 3 miles around you with one input. And that input is then comes into the brain through the nervous system. Like I said, the fovea of the eye is the right size for that. And we We then take that information. It comes in a dual form. Each side of the nervous system processes it separately. And in the brain, those two converge in a stereoscopic sense. And that convergence actually uses a stepped-up frequency. So the frequencies of consciousness are actually the result of that synthesis of the two sides of the nervous system. And that is a generality that is applied through the nervous system. One of the basic ideas is that this is the first algorithm. It's the algorithm of the change in space. You know, if you move, you change. There's a natural quality of space that adjusts to your movement, and this is true of everything. And the nervous system uses this as the basis of its neurological input. Now, the second algorithm has to do with what happens when there is resonance within the system. The first system doesn't require resonance. It is basically a subdivision or a collapse of a measurement, a point-to-point, a single unit to the forward is then subdivided and adjusted to cover the entire space around you, so that each fragment of that space is recognizable as its own addressable space up to several million units. And it's a collapse. It comes right in. There's no resonance with it. It comes right in, and it's continuous. It doesn't stop. It's not a single cycle. I present it as a single cycle, but it's like stopping light. You can't stop light. It goes. But you can conceive of it as in a freeze frame, which is what the SCIET is. And so that then has the problem comes up that, okay, so the universe is created when God or the Creator reaches a space that's unoccupied. There's nothing there. It's a complete state of awareness with no interference and nothing. And at that stage asks, where am I? Or says, basically, I am, or I am here, or whatever. And that here then is subdivided in this same fashion, the SCIET. Subdivides all that space into more or less continuous spaces, taking the smallest fragment is at the center, is then re-subdivided as a single unit. So you have, I call those magnitudes. So once a subdivision or a site forms, then it has magnitudes that get smaller and smaller. And in the case of the creation, the magnitudes got smaller and smaller until they reached the same size as the intrusion of the Creator, wherein that they essentially resonated with the what you might call the creation substance, which would be the intrusion of the Creator's size, because there's no limit on awareness. And so the only limit is the imposed limits of the Creator. And so the creation has a maximum size, which was when it was formed, and a minimum size of what the Creator's awareness was when the Creator intruded upon the unlimited awareness. So
and because we're all extensions of Creator, we also decide limitations as well.
That's right.
By that,
we are exactly.
Yeah, and that's the and it just goes to show our innate, internal, and mostly dormant powers to shift the field or change the quantum field, and the old mind power thing. And this is really fascinating stuff, Dane, because many of us who've been at this for a while know that what our physical eyes see, what's actually outside of our physical bodies and non-physical bodies for that matter, is quantum, a wave of an endless wave of quantum field particles that are in wave form, and some people call it, when they add that, I suppose in mathematical terms, they break it down to a whole series of ones and zeros. And that's what our eyes actually see. And then when that information comes through our physical eyes and reaches our visual cortex, it's our visual cortex that puts together that informational field into a so-called physical reality, a table, a chair, a window, or what, and whatnot. But what you've explained seems to really break down at a deeper level more of the nuts and bolts of how that actually occurs and what actually occurs once all that information enters our field. Very fascinating stuff. And tell us about how our nervous system has I knew, and many of us know, that our nervous system is kind of like the physical level conductor or conduit or representative of pretty much anything non-physical, the spiritual, energetic realms,
Right.
And so tell us how the nervous system has a frequency above and beyond the electromagnetic frequencies which affect our consciousness. It's very interesting. Go ahead.
Okay. The second algorithm that's important here is the algorithm of resonance. And the algorithm of resonance begins with the interaction of the descended awareness of the creator to the creation substance, so to speak. And when that happens, it's the first time that there's actually a reaction between two of these infinite centers. And they're not really infinite. They go, they go to the center. They go to the level of creation, the creation substance. But what it amounts to is that a SCIET can be understood as a balance of empty space against each other. The underlying mathematics, in other words, when I first got into this, I had this intuitive understanding of how it worked. And the more I went into it, I realized that it couldn't come from nothing. That even though there was the void, which I call the awareness, and it was limitless, and it had, and you couldn't put any limits on it. There was some quality within it that from which our creation emerged. And what I understood was that it has essentially a coming and going quality. It's been analyzed in physics as the quantum foam. And the quantum foam is described as as basically bubbles that come and go. They are quantum units that exist for a quantum moment and then disappear.
Yeah.
And they come and go. And so in describing that
appear
quantum,
and reappear.
Yeah. And so in describing that quantum unit, I realized that it could be described as a tetrahedron. Because in coming and going, it doesn't just magically appear as one size. It appears as a presence, and then it disappears. And in doing so, it can be described as a unit that that can be described as equally spaced almost. In other words, a tetrahedron is not a tetrahedron as the sides. It's a tetrahedron from the middle. So the middle has four legs that reach out and interact with the space around it. And so you have four legs that are from the center. And then the quantum unit essentially exists within those legs. And its appearance in this universe is really relative to its emergence it kind of grows and disappears is the assumption here. And so in growing and disappearing, the legs of the tetrahedron are the operative function, the operative feature. And so in understanding how to create this, I used that idea and realized that that was impossible, that though you couldn't build something out of something like that there had to be a way to stabilize that coming and going. And so the SCIET represents an isotope of 20 of these coming and going bubbles, and it creates a stable area. And then the only thing that we see that exists in our universe is the interactive zones between them. So The site consists, in our space, of 12 interactive corridors, and they're best described as event horizons because the bubbles are essentially little black holes. And the interaction between them creates a disturbance in space that can be thought of as an event horizon. So each operative site consists of 12 event horizons emerging from a central point. I call that an isotope of tetrahedrons, of these tetrahedron bubbles. And this is the functional quality of light and the functional quality of change at the dynamic or etheric level. And it's all based on line of sight or lines. In other words, underlying our reality, there is a straight line quality. This is what's used in crystals. Everybody who's observed nature sees that there is this straight line quality. What's next is the creation of spheres. Now, the creation of spheres is what I'm really trying to talk about here, because this is what you're asking about. You're asking about the nature of the energy body and how we process information. Well, what it amounts to is that you have to have a way to create spheres because they don't just magically appear. And so the way this happens in nature is that when these two resonant points, or two points, which are basically sites, resonate together, the resonance comes from a central point and goes back to both ends, both centers. When it reaches the center, it can't go any further. It can't go into the center. So what it does is each of those 12 angles or arms is then processed into a layer that begins to orbit the center. So the resonance becomes a continuous feed of orbiting information, which then becomes a spherical shape surrounding it. And this spherical shape this is the basis of spheres in nature. And the brain uses the same technology. All of your input comes in a stream, and it comes into the brain where it is then spun into layers of information in your brain. That's why when people die, and then in the afterlife, or when their psychics want to visit with them, they see orbs. Well, the orb is basically the energy that is created in the brain through this process, and the being, that would be you or anybody in this process, is at the center of these layers of information. So when a person dies and their soul leaves, it is basically leaves as a energetic form. It really is the whole body's dissipation of energy. But at a later point, when it emerges back into our reality and is manifest at a physical level, it's observable as an orb because its creation, it was created by the brain for memory. But the other thing is that not only is it the mind energy in the middle, it is also surrounded by the chakras, because each of the chakras is a certain level of energy that is manifest as a sphere. And so when you come back as in the afterlife and want to come visiting, this is not exactly the Merkaba, but this is a common form of existence for discarnate beings. It's a sphere, and the sphere originates in the brain, and so the nervous system, this creation of spheres that I had discussed earlier, that begins at the most primitive level, which then creates protons. And so the universe actually is more like a precipitation from nothingness, not from nothingness, but precipitation of this resonance spheres in space. And so during the first stage of creation, these resonance spheres precipitate into space and then develop resonance with each other, which is another whole form of resonance, and then actually the beginning of electromagnetism because they begin to resonate to each other. And eventually they become, the resonance becomes such that they coagulate or converge on one another. This is why at the beginning of space, the calculations all show that began as basically a large field, which then gradually formed clumps. And but the main thing we need to get to here is that these spheres resonate with one another, and as a byproduct of this, they also create energy forms that are in the etheric that are spheres. In other words, every object that exists in space continuously creates memories, shared memories with everything around it. And so a planet consists of shared memories of everything it's been around forever during its existence. And as a consequence, every planet is surrounded by these memory spheres, and they're etheric creations that are, we don't really interact with them in an obvious way, but we can see that they exist from a variety of forces. For instance, pyramids can be explained the pyramid effect can be explained rather easily with these, and the human body and the nervous system is not something that just magically appeared, but it's something that evolved on a planet in correspondence with these layers of energy. In other words, just like the human body has two sides and two nervous systems, left and right, and they have equal, almost identical inputs that go to each hemisphere, and the hemisphere then integrates these. But what I'm getting to here is that nervous system evolved in basically an ocean of energetic effects that are on the planet, that cover the planet, surround the planet. And so when you walk forward, you're not walking through air so much as you're walking through the Earth's energy field. And that energy field is in layers that are discrete. Each layer, maybe only a quantum unit thick, is discrete and is balanced to the center of the Earth. And so this layers of energy fields that surround the planet are essentially the ocean of information about the planet that we interact with and that the nervous system evolved as a result of. And so your own energy field is of a similar construction, and its evolution has been dependent on this interaction with the environment. The spheric energy layers that surround the planet provide a lot of feedback. When I was getting the download about this, I had a vision of looked like two combs. It's all very weird when you're getting the vision, but it looked like two combs that I understood were energetic, and they were going across one another. And as each of these teeth, so to speak, passed over another one, there was a burst of energy. And the knowledge that was conveyed with that was rather extensive, but essentially what it means is that this is the source of what we consider psychic information. The spheres that we're talking about contain information. They're not just energetic forms. They are filled with information. And this information can only be exchanged when there is a perfect alignment between the centers of the two sources, and on that center, at a certain point of balance between the two centers, the energy of both of their energy fields will be exchanged, equalized, so to speak. And this is, the system that I'm talking about is fairly simple. It consists of a means to measure the space around you, then a means to collect that information and store it. And It's a simple set of rules that can be applied widely to understand much of nature. And, it doesn't try to address everything because that's, I can't really compete with, thousands of years of evolved knowledge in a lifetime. But the foundation of this is sufficient to be extended quite a ways. And I consider it to be the foundation of a new society, of basically a galactic understanding that humanity can use to build all kinds of things. One of the most obvious things that would be important to us is an understanding of torsion fields and how the torsion fields are essentially these spherical layers interacting at the center. And so when they interact, they create a new frequency. And interestingly, that frequency, the algorithm or the equation for that is that both centers, or all the centers involved, are primes. And so each one is unique, but when they interact, you can use what is basically Pythagorean theorem of a squared plus b squared, the square root of those two added together would give you the common frequency, the common denominator frequency. So it's not that complex. Most of what I have to say, or most of what I have discovered, is actually evident in historical information from the sciences. It's something you'd have to understand, you'd have to get into. But the essence I'm trying to convey at this short time is that there's the way to create spheres that store information. There's a way to understand that information being exchanged between those spheres. And this is a key to understanding how the human nervous system works. Our body generates two fields that come in through the separate nervous systems on the right and left. Those two inputs are essentially complements, or I forget what they call that, but they're opposite of each other. They're perfectly matched. You're looking at the same thing. You're getting information from the same stuff. They come in separately, and they converge in the mind to create a separate third field. It's a much higher frequency, and that is the use of focus. That field is the convergence of those two fields. And if you think about your focus and where your focus comes from, it's the convergence of the fields. You control how those two fields converge. Now, you can take those two fields and converge them the size of a nickel at a distance. If you are, when you look at things, you don't just look at them, you focus on them. And when you focus on them, you are projecting yourself into them or at them at a very much higher level than just simply focusing your eyes. At the same time, you don't have to focus like that. You can focus widely. You can bring your focus into your mind and make it so that your focus is sideways and to the right. In other words, basketball players, for instance, talk about having court vision. Well, that court vision is understandable as being aware of everything on the court at the same time. And to do that, you have to pull your focal point inside and then radiate it so it's as big as the basketball court. And so essentially the whole basketball court is in the player's mind as everybody's moving around. And
Fascinating. Now, I mean, it's very interesting when you touched on these spheres around a planet, for example, or around a person that also hold the memory of all events experienced by either the planet or the individual, whatever the object is.
Yeah, whatever's involved.
And
right? Frequency being.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting because you've just released some black ops information there. Because anyone who's seen the movie, it's called Source Code, came out a few years ago. Source Code, and you'll be familiar with the actor. I can't remember his name right now, and he had this well, he was in a coma, but he was actually in a conscious state within that coma, for lack of a better way of putting it. And they had him just half his body. He was horribly dismembered.
I saw that movie.
He would
know the details.
Yeah. Well.
About, but go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When he asked when he asked the guy on the TV screen or on the monitor, which is a abstract representation of him communicating with someone on the physical plane, you know, what's going on, how does all this work? Then you got that scientist guy who starts explaining to him how each person has this field, like a membrane around them, and there's a way to tap into that field or memory and traverse timelines as well. And
right.
I knew at the time when I saw this a few years ago, this is another Cabal soft disclosure black ops thing that they're utilising. And that obviously dovetails in a way that I suppose validates exactly what you've been saying.
Well, Jim, there's only one reality. And everybody has a different piece of it. So, it's...
Yeah, exactly.
We see all of these parts demonstrated by other people all the time. And what I've tried to do is create a logical system that we could program, that we can use basically, polarity, basically on a bit computer language to describe. And I started out with this vision back in the 70s, and it took a long time to manifest. And I call it
understandable.
Manifestation is the right way to understand it. I didn't think about it, Jim. I pondered on it, and then I would get another download.
Exactly. Yep. That's right. That's right.
And I would go months, even years, stuck on something that I couldn't get past it. It was like a logical incongruity. Then one day when I was just, reading a magazine or having a discussion, something would be triggered, and I'd get another big download explaining it all. And this went on for years.
Yeah.
I mean, it went from 1974 and into the 90s. I published the first version in 95, and then what's on the web now as SCIET.com is something I basically created in the early 2000s and updated around 2012. But this is knowledge that permeates our world.
Exactly. You've managed to somehow grasp it. And folks, with this course, you get the total, I suppose, accumulation of all these, decades of not just collecting this and downloading this, but making sense of it into understandable words.
This is the main thing.
So quite a lot of data there. Yeah. So let's quickly move on.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Dane, because we're running out of time. Let's quickly move on to...
your show. Go for it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Rhodium and Iridium, how they're used by the pineal gland to create a superconductor portal field, which when fully activated allows us to travel through time and space. Let's just spend just a couple of minutes of that and see if you can break it down to,
okay.
In a way,
the evolution of consciousness took place in several stages. The first stage was amino acids remembering their origins, and that gradually grew into being able to live, to capture the energy of the earth and move around on it. And one of the key to this was the utilization in nature of what I call the elements of life. That's there's 11 or I don't know. It keeps alternating between 11 and 13, depending on who you read. But basically, they call them platinum group elements, and they are long metallic elements that, when they are mechanically impacted, will deform, and essentially their end valences will grip each other, and the result is a flow of energy from one end to the other, and it results in a superconductive field, a Meissner field, and this is natural, and these elements in their monatomic form are pervasive in nature, always have been, and are part of the whole scheme of life. And in the human body, the predominant ones used for the nervous system are rhodium and iridium. And the glial cells are what gathers these things and holds them. And the glial cells surround all the nerve endings, and the nerve endings then have essentially a fluid in them, and so the mechanical action of the neurotransmitters moving there's a reason why neurotransmitters move across a gap. It's not just like, what the hell's that for? It's there so that they can, so that these rhodium and iridium molecules can become activated and generate this field. The body uses this field as its field of information. That's how come you can be aware of everything in your body simultaneously. That's not being handled by electromagnetic conduction. That's being handled by a frequency based on the superconductive field generated by the iridium and rhodium. And it's not just those two; those are the predominant ones. These are when you go to sleep, these elements are essentially released by the body, by the glial cells and the cells in general, which have them also, into the bloodstream. These then flow with the blood into the pineal gland when you sleep. And the pineal gland basically attracts all of these iridium and rhodium molecules that are released by the body, and they converge on the pineal gland and are used to generate this field. Now, the pineal gland is located to the close to the center of the brain and at the top of the spinal cord. And the frequencies that are generated by the brain when you're sleeping are used to then stimulate the pineal gland and simultaneously activate the iridium and rhodium molecules into a superconductor state. This state then provides basically the basis of a entry into no time, which is an opening in space into the awareness that doesn't. It's like it tears a hole in space-time, and within that hole or around that hole, then you can activate, or I shouldn't say activate. You can enter any state in the creation through the awareness. Now, the awareness is frequently called the void or the source field. And the awareness is essentially without limitation. And so when something goes into it, it can come out anywhere. And information from anywhere can come into it. There is no distance when you're in the awareness field. That's why when you make a portal such as a Stargate, it is you enter that, you come out wherever you're going without any interruption. You're just there because what's happened is that you enter a state of no time in the awareness, and when you come out, you're at a point that is frequency matched, so that you leave one frequency and you enter another frequency. And when you enter the awareness, you don't interact with the awareness because materiality can't interact with the awareness. It doesn't interact with the awareness. So all it does is create a space, a gap, like a synaptic gap between one place and another. And you go through it, you end up in another place. And this is the key to portal travel. So, and this is the key to the say. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that you've just explained the mechanics of how so-called dreams occur when we fall asleep?
Right. You access the no time to connect to information from throughout the universe, whatever state that whatever frequencies you are, bringing to it attracts other frequencies that match it. And, they can be bizarre because the frequencies are not, what you might call coherent thoughts often. And so you get a matching incoherent thought.
Right.
And so it's there's not, the system I've developed is not particularly complex. Once you understand the nature of the awareness and the nature of the etheric realm, with the etheric realm, basically, in a sense, there is no ether. The ether is essentially the consequences of everything interacting. It's like we're living in a giant field of one-on-one interactions. And all it takes for us to interact with them is to go line of sight, one-to-one with them. And then suddenly we're etherically interacting with them. It generates essentially, simulates what seems to be a sea of the ether. But, and there are, there are etheric particles in it. So it's not like it's not, it doesn't have the possibility of flowing or moving, as many people call it, a hydrodynamic ether or a fluidic ether. It has qualities that.
Yeah, it's different qualities, although non-physical in nature, and understandable.
Right.
So, well, let's then, for that matter, dive into how tachyons and the Philosopher's Stone and ormus can all be used to activate the pineal gland to help us more readily tap into these abilities. This superconductor portal field in the pineal gland. More consciously. When we want to, not just when we sleep.
In that sense, these elements, there are, like I said, there's 11 of them that are well known and that are referenced. And these 11 manifest in different ways. The Philosopher's Stone essentially is created when basically you collect your first pee. When you wake up, your first pee in the morning contains the ormus or the iridium and rhodium that is discharged, that was flowing in your blood to the pineal gland. It's discharged by your kidneys and your pee. Well, this was to make the Philosopher's Stone in antiquity. These people would collect their morning pee. Every morning, and then they had a process that was conveyed to them in language. It would never, unless you were told what it meant, you'd never guess, and that, of course, is meant to be. But essentially, they boiled it with some additives over a long period of time. It can take up to 2 years of processing to make the Philosopher's Stone. But once it's made, the person whose pee it was made of has a very strong interaction with it. It essentially will activate the body as though it basically turns the whole body into a pineal gland kind of thing. It elevates the frequency of the body to the point where at a certain place, the body becomes able to teleport, to transport to any point within the field, in the Earth field, and then elsewhere, depending on what can be conceived. One of the interesting things that's revealed here is that the body, essentially, the soul, body energy field, exists as like a corpuscle of light. And as you're probably aware, light is generally understood to exist both as a wave and a particle. And in this sense, the body is a particle. And when it enters a wave state, it is essentially a energy sphere that surrounds the Earth. Now, so when people die and enter a state of in the afterlife, so to speak, and they have the ability to be, called by somebody saying, "Oh, come to me," it sounds silly, but the reality is that the dead are essentially equally distributed around the planet, and when an ascended master has this ability, he can literally have a sense of presence everywhere. He can hear you talking. He can talk to you wherever you are, and that's because he has brought his entire physical being to that level of energy. Whereas people die, they bring 24 ounces or 24 grams of energy. An ascended master brings his body weight of energy, which is greatly different. And ascended masters are special light beings, and the process of becoming a special light being like that has been transferred from generation to generation, and it's publicly available now. People don't do it. Even people who know it and have transferred the knowledge pretend they don't know it and don't do anything with it. But I'm one of them. I understand what it would take, but I'm not collecting every morning's first pee. It's a habit you would have to adopt consciously. On the Prepare for Change Leadership website, I have an article called "The Elements of Life," and in it I have a link to a site that has instructions on how to build, a modern chemist's setup to do the process of creating the Philosopher's Stone.
Okay.
So. Yeah, and as far as iridium goes, and tachyons are also interesting because tachyons are essentially this group of elements that are activated by stars. Stars eject matter, and old stars eject heavy metals as matter into the space, and those heavy metals, as I described earlier, become activated and become superconductive element, portal type things. And because of this, wherever they're ejected in space and they become activated and they become their own portals, they can appear wherever you can attract them. This is what a lot of alien science, ET science, utilizes. In fact, it's interesting because it may be that that these ejected particles have been going on for billions of years. The stars, all the stars in space that have jets of energy shooting out of them. These are galaxies, I suppose. But anyway, each of these ones is ejecting tachyons, and it's conceivable that over time there are going to be so many tachyons in space that it could shift all of space into this level of awareness that we're talking about using the Philosopher's Stone to attain individually. I mean, this is what I've been realizing lately as I've understood more about tachyons, is that these things have been ejected from stars continuously. And that means that they are that they are all over space. I mean, when they talk about the Earth moving into a cloud of energy, of highly energized particles, it's like, okay, that's nice. What the heck are they talking about? What energized, what are they talking about? And but if they could be tachyons. You know what I'm saying?
Well, on that note, let's get into. I mean, I understand what you're saying because it's commonly known, at least with savvy audiences, that stars themselves are, portals or vortices in the middle of them, and obviously they're going to be bringing in something through them from the higher dimensions, typically, and one of them would definitely be tachyon. So that all makes sense. And on the note of tachyons, let's finish off with how when tachyons are summoned throughout the galaxy by using the power of our own consciousness, we can trigger the event.
Right. It's interesting because tachyons are attracted to consciousness, while electromagnetism rejects them or repulses them. Consciousness attracts them. And this is why, and this is the practice, Qigong is a practice that where people, they are able to increase their psychic energy. Well, that psychic energy is really, it's their consciousness attracting chi or tachyons or ormus, however you want to term it, that exist in space, and they attract them. They learn how to hold them in their field, and then use them. This is, chi is not just your body energy. It's not just your field of consciousness. It's a combination of the field of consciousness and tachyons or ormus, and they have various Qigong masters have been cremated, and one of the things they discovered when they cremated a Qigong master, he's got a ball of metal in him. And
wow.
And that metal is these heavy metals that are essentially anchored by his body, probably in one of his plexus areas, and so Qi. Qigong masters have control of tachyons.
Wow. So, so they actually found, did you say a ball of metal in their solar plexus area, or was it sort of all around?
I'm not sure where it was. I would assume it's in their solar plexus, and I'm not sure that it actually is manifest as metal until they, are incinerated.
Yeah. Fair enough. And there was this higher than normal concentration of,
metallic
precious
elements.
metal, metallic elements.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, folks. Another good reminder to take your ormus. And I am still sourcing the best supply for that.
The issue with that, Jim, is that unless you learn how to hold it, it will just quantum tunnel away from you, just the same way that it's attracted to tachyon chambers. It'll take off for parts unknown. So this is one of the things I discovered.
Yeah.
You can't just supplement it and have it stick around. You have to learn how to, as the Qigong masters call it, cultivate it. You have to learn how to cultivate the Qi within you.
That's right.
And so
very important that you mentioned that, because and you cultivate it and therefore build up and accumulate the levels of it.
Mm-hmm.
You through the level or frequency level of your consciousness itself and your energy work, your internal healing and clearing work, and so forth. And that way you'll be able to hold and accrete ormus, let alone tachyon particles and so forth. So it's very important that you mention that. And it gives me the idea of an upcoming 144K mass meditation, through the power of our consciousness, projected in a way where we funnel and channel massive amounts of tachyon particles through the veil and right throughout Earth and Mother Gaia on all planes of existence.
Well, I think that you're right. A meditation can interact with them. It is necessary to develop language and visualization and thought forms that are directed to do that, because just raising the frequencies, as has been the traditional goal, and which is very effective, isn't going to do the same thing. Raising the frequencies and asking those frequencies to match and attract tachyon energy, I think would be a big plus.
Exactly. And it's a typical example of what the both physical and non-physical cabal is praying we don't really, discover and let alone apply and learn to apply. So very interesting thought there, folks, to walk away with. Now, Dane, tell us where people can apply for this free course based on some of the information that you've shared with us today.
Okay, I'm going to add a form to the article that Ada posted, and they can complete that form, and that will put them on a list to receive an invitation to the course.
Okay, and where will they find this application?
Yeah, that will be on the website, and it'll be related to the article that about the course that Ada just published. I haven't created it yet, but it's not a big deal. I'll get it done.
Sure. So, folks, just watch out for that, and visit prepareforchangeleadership.org. Make sure you're subscribed there and check in with that website, and that's where you'll find. Well, you can even contact Dane through that website, you can apply there as soon as it's posted. So, Dane, thank you very much for setting aside the time to
thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, you're welcome. For people to get a feel for what you've been doing for 40 plus years, and people are going to be, for those who apply for this free course, if you're naturally drawn and guided that way, will be the beneficiary of so many years of downloading and synthesizing and making sense of such complex things into much easier to understand information, verbal information, I guess. So thanks again, Dane. Yeah. It was wonderful having you on. And folks, after this short musical break, we're going to be right back to discuss the big elephant in the room regarding yesterday's post from Cobra, what it actually means, the most important takeaway message from that, which, as far as I can tell, 95% of people have missed. And, of course, making sense of all the chaos in an empowering way through the last segment, which is Planetary Liberation News Analysis. Be right back, folks. This is Ground Crew Command Radio. You're listening to The Unknown Light Warrior. And before I forget, folks, let me see here, just to quickly mention, the next 144K mass meditation is going to be on the, let me see, I think it's a lunar eclipse now. I get confused between solar eclipse and lunar eclipse because of these three quick successions of eclipses that we're having on obviously last Thursday, the 12th, and again the 27th of July, and the next one I believe is the 11th or 13th of August. So the next one is the 27th, and stay tuned for that. You will get an email notification regarding that, so watch your inbox. And we don't have any further intel from our contact in Turkey in terms of the apparent war that's breaking out. And if this is a particular civil war of some sort that is not in the interests of the cabal, then that simply means that you definitely won't be hearing it from the cabal media, aka establishment media, unless they can spin it in a certain way where it does serve their interests, where, let's just say hypothetically, the positive secular Turkish faction of the Turkish military is doing some sort of military coup and is cleaning house, so to speak. If the cabal mention anything about it, it'll be making them look bad and making Erdogan look like some sort of innocent, lawful victim. But you know how all that works. So with that out of the way, let's just quickly get into the most important thing for you to realise and take away from Cobra's pretty fascinating post only released yesterday. And the main reason, and this is the only real reason why I bring it in. So let's look at it from a higher level and from an objective clinical perspective, I guess. The information, pretty much most of the information, is what's it all centered around, okay? It's centered around what's actually going to happen before, during, and after the event, okay? The three waves of so-called ascension. It's not really the best word to apply to what's actually going to happen in terms of what he means, but I suppose it does involve ascension in terms of actual personal frequency. Three waves of people that are going to be literally visited, reunited at the physical level by their galactic families or the Confederation, beginning with the first wave, who are the most ready for it, the most healed, cleared internally, and the most highest levels of consciousness that are relatively balanced. And they'll come back and help the rest of the population, including the second and third wave, and then the same thing will happen in succession over a period of about 5 years. But of course, the first wave, if you're a relatively healed, cleared, still person, not entrenched in any false enough type of personality, identity kind of thing, and are relatively balanced emotionally and energetically and so forth. If you've come a long way, you'll be one of the first ones to be picked up. And then you'll be healed, you might even be transferred into another body that's grown and is in full alignment with the beauty of who and what you really are, down at the physical level as well, in other words. And you'll come back and you'll be the ambassador, the teacher, the helper, the healer for the second wave. And then the same sort of thing will happen with third wave and then for the rest of humanity. Now, and he gets into some other details, but that's basically the main message. Now, why would he explain that? And some other details about the event as well. Now, why would he explain that? Okay. And as well as, finally, give away what the Chimera actually are in terms of their, in the physical, organic sense, with them being, insectoid beings. Notice how he's never been able to release that information up until now. That, let's just say, implies that it's now safe enough for us to learn who and what the Chimera really are in the physical sense, meaning they've been dealt with or neutralised either completely or enough to a point where it's safe to release that information. It's safe for us to know that. And notice the verbiage, where it says, now it can already be revealed that the Chimera are actually insectoids. Now, notice the word, instead of just saying, now it can be revealed, he says, now it can already be revealed, meaning, or again, implying that it's happened or can be done sooner than expected, because, the RM and Cobra, for that matter, were always planning on releasing that bit of information at the right time. But the word already is key. But basically, the whole article or intel posting is centered around what's actually going to happen before, during, and after the event. Why would he provide that information? I mean, he's provided that information about the event in the past, but this time he's provided actual sequence of events as well, not just what's going to happen, in a way that he hasn't done before. So the underlying message here, in terms of where he's going with it is get ready. He's preparing us. Or the RM and the Pleiadians are preparing us. Why would he need to prepare us? Then begs the question, why would he need, or the galactics need to prepare us if there's no other more pertinent information to provide at this point of time? Why does he need to prepare us, or they need to prepare us, if it's not going to happen soon, or where we've entered a window of time where let's just say, for the sake of being conservative, the probabilities of it happening have just increased exponentially due to recent clearings, planetary external clearings. It's preparation for that. They're basically saying, oh, okay, well, this has happened sooner than expected. Great. We better get this information out to them so that they know what's going on and what can expect when the event occurs or leading up to the event, to prepare them for the event. That's what it is. It's a preparation for the event in a way that is implying that it's about to happen very, very soon. Therefore, we better get them ready. We better give them this information so that they know what's going on when it actually happens. Okay. That's the elephant in the room with Cobra's last post. And the other thing that implies all of this, as in, again, from their perspective, the RM and the Pleiadians, where they're basically saying to themselves, we better get them ready by telling them what's going to happen and the general gist of what to expect so that we know what's going on, is notice how it's very resource heavy. Okay? Now, it's very resource heavy about getting rid of the so-called vertical implant to connect with your I am presence, understanding the 13 rays and emanations from source, okay, and the dynamic interplay between the absolute and the primary anomaly, understanding whereas I've just lost it, the non-physical planes, about planes of existence, okay, providing these resources and therefore implying many people are going to need this to deal with the very intense energetic ramifications of what's clearly coming down the pike in the more real sort of way that hasn't occurred or been available or manifesting in the past. It's preparation, folks. And it wouldn't be preparing us if it wasn't imminent. Preparation for the event. And understandably, they need us. And it's very helpful if we're prepared in a way where we understand what's happening, or when it happens, to understand what's going on before, during, and after the event. And that's the underlying background sort of message behind Cobra's latest post. It is possible that all plasma toplet bombs have been removed and they're just winding up with Chimera Draco presence on the physical plane, specifically underground. They may be just winding up now, mopping up, and finishing up any jockeying for positions on the surface to do it all smoothly, round them up all smoothly, make sure they got the manpower to be able to round up all these scumbags, and for the legal processes to be able to handle such a huge, influx of due process, court hearings and that. It's a huge undertaking. So that's the deal with Cobra's latest post. That's the main thing to take away from it. It's preparation, and they wouldn't be preparing us in this sort of way if it wasn't imminent. You know, why provide this information now when he could have easily provided it in the past? Or maybe he has provided it in the past, and a lot of it redundant, but here he is posting specifically about it. Again, you know, it's links to how to connect with nature, links to how to connect with ascended beings, element to connect with your I Am Presence, one after the other, and he's never posted so many resource links in the one post. You know, understanding the 13 rays, you know. So it's preparation, you know, and the resources to handle the intense, albeit extremely positive energies. Because remember, as I explained in the internal compression breakthrough guided audio healing session, as well as the 4 phases, you may want what you want and a beautiful, wonderful life situation, but if the conditioned, programmed, egoic mind, the false persona, isn't familiar with it, it gets scared, it gets nervous and pulls back to comparatively far more negative energies. You know, even if it's uncomfortable, it doesn't care. The false persona and conditioned adult mind only cares about what it's familiar with, so we can handle expectations coming down the line. Again, symptoms of trauma or PTSD. It's really important to appreciate, and of course, suffice to say, easily handled if you do your internal work. Again, if you're not, let's just say, entirely happy with you know, if you're not working with anything that's robust enough, energetically speaking, you know, give the 4 phases a go, and or the internal compression breakthrough guided audios. ICB is the acronym for it, at returntoyourtruth.com, and give them a go, because I've very deliberately made them as affordable as possible so that people can access them. Okay, there's no $2,000 price tag BS here. I don't really believe in that. So the other thing that helps the egoic personality, as always, is meditation CDs, audios, and listen to them daily. That really helps with changing the deeply ingrained neural pathways of the physical brain. And the older you are, the more deeply ingrained those negative neural pathways are. So it really complements energy work quite well. Okay, because physical level neural pathways take longer to change, just by virtue of the fact that they're physical, therefore more dense, therefore more clunkier, therefore more slower to change. It's not like non-physical matter where you can change it in an instant. That's why it's so easy to manifest in the 5D, for example, or the non-physical planes for that matter. So, big deal stuff there, folks. Take it all in. You know what to do now. You know what the deal is. Now you can act. Now you can move forward boldly because you know how to handle things, how to move forward. So let's finish off this yet another huge episode of Ground Crew Command with the 12 minutes that we have left. Okay. Planetary Liberation News Analysis. The US military, with Trump as their figurehead, and the British monarchy summit in the UK resulted in the Melania No Courtesy, and which is a huge big deal, by the way, in terms of royalty protocols that you have to follow if you were to meet the the Draco and Archon incarnates known as the British monarchy. If you have to meet them, you have to follow really strict protocols. Women, for example, do have to curtsy in front of the Queen when they're introduced to her. That's like a real hard and fast, strict rule. Okay, remember, this is old bloodline aristocracy from the Middle Ages we're talking about here, from the ancient world. Anyway, so there's that, and the surrender of the Cabal aristocratic bloodlines of Europe to the US military. Now, is this for real? And are the top, primarily Italian, 13 papal bloodlines surrendering too? You know, that, understandably, I'm sure that's what, for any of you, anyone who reads Fulford, that's probably the first question that really entered your head. So, let me see here. Slight little technical glitch. Bear with me, folks. Okay. Let me see. Apparently, as well, that the Queen draped her gloves, okay, over her arm. I think that's Melania's arm. Okay, I beg your pardon, it's her own arm, the Queen's arm. So the Queen draped her own gloves over her own arm. Her white gloves over her own arm, just like a white flag, okay, which is another, ceremonial symbolic communication of surrender, which I only just found out now. But again, the rational mind needs to believe this. It needs to be certain of this. Okay, so is it for real? And are the rest of the top, primarily Italian bloodlines, the so-called elders of Zion, does this mean they're surrendering as well? Now, if you carefully read the language of Fulford's Pentagon source, you'll see that this intel is all based on symbology, as I've explained, expressed by Melania Trump and Princes William and Charles not being there, because apparently they couldn't suffer the indignity. And that's all, and of course the whole white gloves over her arm thing, that's all we've got to go on, really. That's all we've got to go on. So it may well be very much true, because the old pseudo-feudal societies of Europe and Asia are very rigidly based in such ceremonial symbology, like I said. So, because of that, I would say yes, the British monarchy and the monarchies of Europe have surrendered. But as always, take it in with a grain of salt, partly because it doesn't really show and represent the 13 papal bloodlines. I mean, they're all interrelated to one degree or another, but the actual 13 bloodlines themselves that are, mostly based in Italy, most of them, about 80% of them are mostly in Italy and Switzerland, those who control the Vatican and the P2 Freemason Lodge. It doesn't really confirm whether they've surrendered. And chances are they're split at this point, with some wanting to surrender, some wanting to fight on to the death. There's also the benevolent factions within those 13 papal bloodlines as well, that we've known about for years. So the short of it is, European monarchies, yes. 13 bloodlines themselves at the very top of all this, we have to wait and see. Okay, and that's the best we can, I suppose, extrapolate from that with the information that we've had so far. So moving on, with the World Cup in Russia over, and a sincere congratulations to France over that. It's not an easy thing to even make, let alone win the World Cup, as in making it to the World Cup. The Trump-Putin summit merely is the finishing touch to the pending and long-planned events of, as I explained in last week's episode, Russia kicking out the cabal out of Ukraine and Iranian-Russian forceful measures to make Israel follow international law and human rights laws, with the likely cessation of the Golan Heights to Syria, among other things. But what opportunity does this open up for light workers as it relates to planetary liberation? That's the question to ask here. What does it mean for us, and what can we do with this to further the planetary liberation efforts? Well, with our mass meditations and for some of us private remote viewing clearing work, we do have the opportunity to help the physical light forces take things further by even removing the cabal from Israel and as well, and help the positive factions that have been equally enslaved there in Israel as well. And as always, they need our help. You know, the physical forces, white hat forces in general, they need our help to set the energies to a high enough frequencies where they can make their operations go even smoother and quicker than what it otherwise would without our, than what it otherwise would without our involvement. As you know, the cabal might order Erdogan of Turkey to make trouble, just to destabilise any Russian and Iranian attempts to remove cabal power in Ukraine and Israel. That's the deal. That's what's at stake, and what we can gain if we keep on holding the light grid, participating in mass meditations. That's the kind of difference we're looking at if we do all that. So, moving on, with codes like BODEXTQR, removal sequence in progress, as well as Phoenix Keyhole in progress from Cobra, get ready for further breakthroughs and sometimes rough energy shifts as we march on to planetary freedom, which I touched on at the beginning of the show. But, this drives home the point, of don't let up on internal clearing sessions and 140-day mass meditation, folks, partly to better cope with the massive energetic, equilibrium shifts that result from all these. You do have to clear things internally as they come up as a result of these planetary shifts, and as they're forced up by the ever-increasing light coming in as the planet gets clearer and clearer. Fundamental to matching the high frequency of the event itself. And of course, the more you clear yourself with robust enough methods, tools and resources and support, the more light channels through your personal grids and into Gaia's grids, which amps things up. Makes the event happen sooner rather than later. Again, it sort of compounds. So, moving on to confirmed, as stated in last week's episode by yours truly, Supreme Court Justice pick neocon Brett Kavanaugh was indeed chosen as fodder for the cabal that these also referred to as Democrats and neocons, to shoot down, and then Trump to appear as the accommodating good guy by agreeing with them or caving in, and appearing like he's being forced to pick a Supreme Court justice that the White Hats wanted all along. There is still, and that's what I had a strong feeling was happening, which I explained last week's episode, and it was confirmed by, again, this Pentagon intel source. And, there is still possibility that Brett Kavanaugh may be switching sides. But like I said, I'd put my money on the aforementioned intuitive reading I gave last week regarding this guy, where they're just using him for fodder, Trump to look as a good guy by appearing like he's acquiescing to Democrat, i.e. cabal demands, and picking someone else at the last minute. Okay, we got about 30 seconds left on the live feed. I've only got 1 point to go. Let's see if I can squeeze it in 30 seconds. Okay, so another prediction confirmed here on Ground Crew Command. The US White Hats have confirmed they will let loose on European and Japanese-based cabal members, or neutralization, straight after they've arrested and jailed all US-based cabal and Luciferian networks, but with the number that need to be put away in the US alone being more like 1 million, again, what can we do to indeed make sure all 1 million cabal, although mostly this 1 million figure is mostly cabal affiliated Luciferian pedophiles, what can we make sure that they're all put away for good? Well, the direct answer to that, and the thing to always keep in mind, is at or around the event when the top half of the cabal in the US is removed and the Chimera and Toppler bombs are finally removed, it'll be safe for physical reunions with our galactic family. Now, what this means is we can then easily carry out large mopping up operations ourselves and just beam up all remaining Cabal and Luciferian pedophiles across North America and go much further than just putting them into jail. We'll be taking them to the galactic central sun for those who don't agree to cross over to the light, and that's that. We'll gain access to all these resources through reunion with our galactic family. So, as easy as it is for many of us to get lost in the excitement and love of reuniting with our galactic family, for me, and speaking for myself, the gloves are really going to come off at the physical level as well when galactic reunion happens. And so now you understand why physical and non-physical darkness is freaking the F out. And again, Cobra's post clearly implies and sends a message, get ready and here's what's going to happen. It's a strong indicator that it's imminent. Now, am I saying it's going to happen tomorrow, or within the week, or within the month? No, not necessarily. All it means is that we've entered a window of time, which could easily be 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, where it is now imminent. That's all it means. Just to clarify that. Because I know people will misunderstand it or misconstrue it and say, oh, the unknown light warrior said it's going to happen, now, anytime, this month. No, that's not what I'm saying. Of course it easily could. All of the signs, indicators, underlying messages are there. So, with that very high note, I'm bringing this yet another riveting, empowering episode of Ground Crew Command to a close, and I trust you got a lot out of it, folks, so you can keep on marching on in a solid, certain, confident way, regardless of what's happened and what it's been like for all of us. Okay, so stay tuned. Now's the time to really hold the light grid, really hold the line. Hang in there, okay? Do the self-love and self-healing stuff and hang in there and stay tuned for next week's episode, very exciting episode, of Ground Crew Command Radio, your support network and your weekly dose of empowering clarity, inspiration and motivation to get you through the Archon Invented Work Week. This is Ground Crew Command Radio. You've been listening to the Unknown Light Warrior. Stay strong and see you next time, folks.